Mark Warden sold his house for Bitcoin. In this special episode of Neocash Radio, we discuss tips and tricks for selling your home for crypto, in part or in whole.
Good morning, JJ.
Excellent. Thank you for joining me. Mark, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, JJ. Pedro, good to see you guys. I've been a longtime listener of your podcast, and I know you're expanding to video now, so congratulations on your success.
Thank you so much. Now, Mark, you have been dealing with crypto, or you've been in the crypto community for a while. You're here in New Hampshire with us. Just give us a quick background on your experience with crypto.
Sure. I would say I'm a real layman when it comes to using crypto. I am an early adopter, but I really never understood it completely. It's just that I am surrounded by a lot of people who get it and who have been involved in crypto since the beginning. A lot of libertarians, if you will. People in the Free State Project have included a lot of early adopters. We can remember years ago at the Porcupine Freedom Festival where people could buy an ice cream cone for Bitcoin. And the joke I like to tell people is that I remember buying a pint of honey for 1 Bitcoin.
Wow.
And then when I was running for office back in 2012, we had a buzz on Reddit and some of the Bitcoin circles that I was the first state legislative candidate to accept Bitcoin contributions for his campaign in the country. So, and I didn't know anything about it. I didn't really know how it worked. I'd heard this guy Satoshi. But I had people around me who explained it to me and could help me with the conversion from Bitcoin to dollars and back and forth. So I've always been supporting it just because of, basically because it's competition to the status quo and to government.
Right. And there you go. We've mentioned that.
That's good enough for me.
Yeah.
Now, your company...
Porcupine Real Estate.
Realestate.com. Let's get into it right away. So you sold a home. You helped sell a home for Bitcoin. Just describe that for a moment.
Sure. It just happened last month here in Manchester, New Hampshire. And I had been putting it out there that I wanted to facilitate a purchase and sale of property in New Hampshire where both the buyer and the seller would exchange in Bitcoin. We've seen a number of instances in the past when I've worked with clients who had good holdings in crypto and they sold it to buy a house. But we couldn't find it where the seller would also accept crypto as a direct exchange. So I said, we got to do this. We got to have New Hampshire on the map in the crypto world. We've been there before. Let's get there again. And I wanted to facilitate that. So I put together a flyer on a couple of properties. I did identify a few different sellers of real estate in New Hampshire who agreed to accept Bitcoin and or Dash for the property sale. You guys know the property out in Henniker. That's a nice 3-4 unit building that's available. There's a 7-unit building in Milton, New Hampshire available. And I figured I'd put my own house for sale on this list, knowing that it was an attractive property and I could do it and let's make it happen. Somehow somebody contacted me. He'd heard about this flyer. I don't know if it was because of the Free State Blockchain Conference in December where I handed out this flyer, but he said, Mark, I heard you have some properties in crypto. I said, sure. He wanted to come out and see it. And he's looking and he has big holdings in Ripple and Bitcoin. He wanted to exchange some of these holdings into another type of real estate, and provide some passive income for himself.
And to diversify holdings.
Exactly. So if you had a big run up, maybe it's a good time to take some of the winnings off the table, as they say in Vegas, diversify, and especially for people who maybe don't even have a high income, but they have a huge amount of crypto holdings, maybe start to get some passive income. So for all those reasons, he thought it was a good investment. So he came out, looked at the house, said, yeah, Mark, this is great. I like the house. And let's agree on a price. Now, of course, I had in mind a price in US dollars that I knew it was worth based on the market values. And I said, this is the number I want. And as long as we can come to that number at the exchange rate of the day of Bitcoin, then this will happen. And he said, great. Today, at that point, it was around $10,500 USD per Bitcoin. I said, okay, well, tell you what, I'll help you out. I'll give you an out. I'll give you a safety valve, a release valve on this purchase if you will. That means if the value plummets before we close, I'll let you back out of the deal. Okay. So let's say it's $250,000 house. And it's $10,000 per Bitcoin. So plus or minus 25 Bitcoin, which is where we ended up. But this was a month before we closed. And I said, if it drops below 10,000, then you can back out of the deal if you want, or we'll just renegotiate from 25 Bitcoin up to 28 Bitcoin, whatever it is. And everything can fine. I wanted him to do a regular home inspection, just like you would with any purchase, even though there's no appraisal because there's no financing involved. I still wanted him to have the peace of mind that he was buying a solid asset, a performing asset that was safe, sane, up to code, and that sort of thing. Flew through the home inspection process, no problem. So that part was easy, actually. Now we have to worry about the bureaucrats, and bureaucrats get involved in the title exchange, recording of title, and something called tax stamps. It goes by different names in different states. Here in New Hampshire, it's called the real estate transfer tax. And that is based on the value of the property being bought or sold. So that had to be converted to dollars to pay the state. The state gets that tax, and it's equal to 1.5% of the value. So basically, at the closing table, we told the title company, title insurance company and attorney what the value was, the market value in our opinion, and he used that when he recorded the tax stamps to pay those.
So we hear about other states looking to pass legislation that allows for any state services to be paid with Bitcoin. If that was the case here in New Hampshire, do you think you could have taken care of the state agency part of it all in crypto?
Yes, that's a great idea. We don't have that opportunity now, but yes, I think that would come to be in the future.
So you went through this. Now, is this finished? Is it finalized now?
Yeah, I gave him the keys. We closed on March 7th.
Okay, so it's closed. It's done deal. And as far as the bureaucrats are concerned, it's all legit and finished, right?
Yes.
So going through this process, and then Pedro has some stuff too. Like there's a lot of people out there who might have crypto and who watch our show or listen to our podcast, and that's awesome. Thank you so much. If they're looking to buy homes, if they're looking to get into property, there are some challenges that they might come up against. And so let's talk through some of those challenges and at least give them a little bit of a heads up as to what they might expect. Mileage may vary.
Here are a couple detail points we'll want to discuss. One is it helps to have a title company that works with you. Out west, they call it an escrow company. Escrow title, it's about the same thing. In Massachusetts, however, you use really a closing attorney. So wherever you are, in whichever jurisdiction or whichever style of closing settlement agent you use, you want to have one that's on board with this whole idea. So the first thing I did when the buyer and I came to an agreement was ran to the title company and said, hey, you have to open a Bitcoin wallet. I wanted to receive the deposit. There's always something called an earnest money deposit. I wanted to receive that in Bitcoin only, not in US dollar denomination. And the title company said, this is great. He thought, maybe he'll get some free publicity. And he and I have worked together for years, and he trusts me. And he and I have been talking about Bitcoin for years. So he opened up a Coinbase wallet. And then I had the buyer send 0.5 Bitcoin as a deposit to that wallet. And that part in the purchase sale agreement was denominated just in Bitcoin, which is pretty cool. It says deposit is 0.5 BTC. He sent that to the escrow agent. Now, if this deal had fallen through, let's say the value plummeted and the buyer backed out, he's entitled to his refund of his deposit. Then he would have gotten the 0.5 back. It doesn't matter what the value of that is in dollars because we'd always denominated it in Bitcoin. Then at the closing table, the three of us sitting there, the title insurance company lawyer, the buyer, and the seller. And we said, okay, look up CoinDesk. In fact, Pedro gave me this advice. I said, how do we know what the value is at that moment? He says, CoinDesk is as good as any. We all brought up our computers, and he said, okay, the value at that moment, I think it was $10,700. And we all agreed, wrote it down on paper, $10,700 divided into the purchase price, and it was so many Bitcoin. It was around pretty close to 25 Bitcoin at the time. We already had a deposit of 0.5. So we signed the paperwork, which is a deed and a couple tax forms, and then we said, we're done, and the buyer sent directly to me, to my wallet, 24.5 Bitcoin.
Wow.
And at the same time, the title company got on his computer and sent me 0.5 Bitcoin. The other details here are two things that have kept this from being more mainstream, and that is that almost every seller out there of a house has a mortgage. So you have to pay that off. And we didn't do that fully in Bitcoin this time. That will happen in the future. But because of the volatility of Bitcoin, it's a little bit dangerous for the title company to receive 25 Bitcoin and then pay off my loan, my mortgage, and then send the balance to the seller, because he might be in jeopardy of losing some of the value.
Because
in
there's
between.
enough volatility in those few minutes of all these transactions.
Exactly,
settling.
just in minutes. So in this case, I had to beg, borrow, and steal enough cash to cover my mortgage. So I went to my savings and borrowed a little money to cover my mortgage. And I sent that in USD to the title company so that they could pay off the mortgage. And that's the way we were able to have the buyer send the full amount directly to me, because the title company paid off my mortgage through other funds. And the other thing is I did ask the buyer to cover his closing costs in US dollars. So he sent a check for 5,000 USD to the title company to cover these tax stamps I mentioned, and title insurance, and a couple of closing and recording fees. Because I didn't want the title company in their first experience with this to have sudden loss in value and be holding the bag.
Right, and that would be bad, bad all the way around. You want everyone that's going through this to come out as a great positive experience, which looks like that's what happened.
That is what happened. It worked out well. The trick is to price it a little bit above the market value. Typically, these buyers are going to have more wiggle room than the seller, and you want to be able to cover that potential for a shortage, and charge them maybe a couple points over market value.
Nice. So overall, you've been, obviously we covered the fact that you've been doing this sort of work for a while and helping other people buy homes and of course buying your own homes, versus your experience with the banks and all of that sort of stuff. Obviously this is a strange, unique experience, but give us your take. What's the difference?
First of all, it's very fast and the costs are very low. You're not paying a lot of money for financing, and even the cost of the transaction of sending and receiving the Bitcoin was very low. You guys will love this. We were sitting at the table and we agreed on this number. So the buyer sent me 24.5 Bitcoin, and let's say $250,000 worth, cost him 55 cents.
Nice.
Isn't that unbelievable? And the title company guy was just aghast, because to wire funds, a minimum $30 just to wire funds, and it takes a day and a half. We sat there and watched the confirmations coming in, and we had a couple of confirmations within 20 minutes, so we knew it was done by then. So this was done at a fraction of the cost and a fraction of the time of the most sophisticated banking system in the world, which is the U.S. banks.
Wow. Now, so that's one experience. Now, Pedro, you've had a slightly different experience. Of course, you haven't bought a home outright with one solid, transaction. But let's talk a little bit about your experience and how it differs.
Sure. So last year, I purchased a home where I used some of the down payment funds coming from Bitcoin. And when I started the process, it was one of your ex-employees, Marika, and she had talked to the mortgage company, and they were on board. They said, we can do this, and they were great to work with. Some of the challenges we came up were, so you have to, because I was cashing out within 3 months of the home sale, they need to see the source of all those funds. So that's going to be one of my tips for the end. And what happened was I used Coinbase, Coinbase and Gemini. And one of the issues were when I went to give them a printout of my transactions that showed, the Bitcoin coming in and the conversion, it was a text CSV file, which apparently doesn't meet federal funding guidelines. So I had to go in with my laptop to the mortgage company. We brought up my account. they needed to see a page that had, my account information, the title, the name of the company, and then we printed the PDF that showed, the whole URL. So that, satisfied that. But what hung up the sale and right to about 8 days before I needed to close was that the underwriter was still uncomfortable signing off on the mortgage. And the last thing he was uncomfortable with was didn't understand what company held my Bitcoin before I sent it to these exchanges, and was struggling with the concept that I was that entity holding onto those Bitcoins. And one of the final things we did that made them comfortable was I showed them the IRS tax forms that I was submitting long-term capital gains for these transactions. So that satisfied, he signed off. And I've since heard that underwriter will never do another crypto transaction. And this is all legal to do, but I could see where maybe somebody that's been in the industry for decades and this is brand new and they're like, I only have a few years left to retire. I don't really need to do this.
Right.
So my recommendation is if you can cash out, 3 months before, you're not going to run into this. But if you are, you really need to use a mortgage company and an underwriter. And the underwriter is the underline that I'm going to put there, that is going to commit to go through with this and basically gives that confidence that this isn't going to be an issue, about a week before the closing.
That's a very good warning for others on how to do this. I've worked with a couple other situations, purchasers who sold crypto in order to buy a home. And to further drill down on what Pedro is saying regarding the 3 months, is that when the underwriters and the loan processors look at your bank statements, they want to see the last 2 months' bank statements to show that you have either a regular paycheck coming in or just that you've had funds in there for that long. They do not want to see a spike in the amount of funds in your account, your checking account or savings account, because in their mentality, the way lenders work and think and the way the underwriters think is that maybe you borrowed that and they don't want you to have other debt that they don't know about. So any the lenders that I work with, when we're dealing with crypto buyers, will say it needs to be seasoned. There's the term that the money needs to be seasoned in your accounts for more than 2 months. Meaning anytime you print out the last 2 months bank statements, it's going to show like it was always there and not this one-time deposit. So that's why what he said, and what you're saying is, anybody who wants to do this, make sure you sell your crypto about 3 months out before you even start the loan application process.
Right. And one of the reasons I didn't do that was at the time last spring, crypto was rising and I was, wanting to, not sell it until I needed it. But, going through that experience, and it was real nail biter right to the end. I mean, I found a property here in New Hampshire that I really liked. I really wanted it. And it almost fell through. So I can only recommend, if you're buying property in New Hampshire, see Mark of Porcupine Real Estate, because you have the connections of the people that are going to be comfortable with seeing this type of transaction go through.
Well, yeah, I think New Hampshire is certainly an outlier in all of this because of so many people who've been familiar with what's going on with the cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin and blockchain technology, but also the fact that people here are more willing to alternatives in general, alternatives to government, to fiat, to, being told what to do, for example. Is there, any of this stuff that can be taken to, outside, of course, New Hampshire, but United States sort of, I think the key points being stressed here are make sure you have people involved all the way through that are committed to using the crypto, that are at least comfortable enough with the crypto to not be, surprised by any sort of fluctuations or any sort of nomenclature technology. But then also it's like, be prepared for a wild ride. Is that...
That's actually the best caveat out there. In my case, when I closed, 5 minutes later, the value of Bitcoin started dropping fast. So I was really put in a bad position. And I've lost a lot of value since then because I didn't want to cash it all right away. In fact, you can't cash it all in Coinbase. They limit you to 100,000 at a time or something like that. But I've been in this long enough to know it's eventually going to come back, and it's not like I needed that money for my next meal. So I just left it in there waiting for it to come back to at least the place where it was the day we transacted. But that's the right warning is for buyers and sellers, build in some a safety buffer when you're doing this.
But JJ, to your point, though, the point JJ was making was not everyone is fortunate enough to live in New Hampshire. So what would be your recommendations for people living in other states? Is the number one recommendation you would give is to cash out early enough so that it doesn't become something that can make the underwriter or mortgage lender uncomfortable?
Yeah, I think that's a very simple solution. Is if you're using it for your down payment, then go ahead and liquidate that amount. Let's say it's 10% of the purchase price. You want to liquidate that amount or a little bit more into US dollars, put it in your regular checking account about 3 months out from when you start your loan pre-approval process. And then once you start the loan pre-approval process, you can't even put an offer on a house until you have that done. So, 3 to 4 months out from when you want to start purchasing the home is when you need to consider doing this.
So is it different if it's a situation where somebody wants to buy real estate all in cash US dollars? Do they need to wait that same time frame, or
that's a very good
still
point.
A title company involved?
Well, there's a title company, but there's no lender. The lender is the one who wants to see this money seasoned. However, often a seller on a cash transaction will say, well, prove to me that you have this money, whether it's cash or Bitcoin or money in your 401k or bars of gold. So if you're going to do a cash transaction, you're going to sell $200,000 worth of crypto to buy a house for $200,000. That's fine, but when you do the purchase agreement, the seller may request a copy of your Coinbase account, and that's fine. You just give them a screenshot and say, I have 25 or 30 Bitcoin right here. You'll say, okay, let's do the deal. Then if you're going to close in 3 weeks or 4 weeks, you just start selling off whatever you want, 10,000 a day or 20,000 a day in Coinbase, so that you have the cash ready to go at closing. Much, much simpler to do an all cash purchase, for sure. It's only if you're going to use financing or a mortgage that you need to have this seasoned account.
So you want to do the hard road. You wanted the one tough thing is do an all crypto purchase. You were like, let's check that box off.
Exactly. It's about the movement. It's about the whole cryptocurrency movement and challenging the status quo in all these other areas.
And the interesting thing about it is, so there were 2 transactions, if I recall. Or one was from the Coinbase Escrow to you, and the other one was the purchase price of the home to you. So now you can record in that sale those 2 transaction IDs, and there's proof of all time that you had that transaction. You can always point to it.
Yeah. Oh, okay, right. Now, you guys will love this. Another beautiful thing is the title company owner said he had a great experience. He loved it, and he wants to do more, and he's willing to ramp up his participation in, for example, maybe taking the Bitcoin into his wallet, exchanging it, and paying off the mortgage. So we did the proof of concept pretty simply on this one, but we're going to go deeper and deeper with subsequent transactions.
Well, that would be great if he became a specialist in this area and becomes more marketable for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. All great stuff. And, this is a very important point of the whole cycle we talk about of closed loop of crypto, from being paid to buying groceries. Being able to buy a home is a big step towards crypto being useful and something that people will find more value and utility in. So thanks so much for joining us, Mark.
Thank you, Mark. And
once again, where can people go to find out more?
We're on Facebook at Team Porcupine Real Estate, or visit my URL directly at porcupinerealestate.com.
Thank you for listening to this special episode of Neocash Radio. Please check out our website at neocashradio.com. Like and share this video or podcast.